Environmental Executive Committee declares the theme for 2021 to be Unity, Renewal and Reconstruction in the year of Charlotte Maxeke.
The past year has been challenging for all of us. The coronavirus and its impact has been felt the world over. But the strength of the South African people has always been measured by its resilience and fortitude, and the willingness to unite and stand together. The African National Congress proudly presents the Progressive Business Forum, the platform to herald a new dawn for the South African economy. Bringing accountability, transparency, and opportunity to the business community, and striving to give effect to the call for a social compact with business, the Progressive Business Forum harnesses the power of technology, making it easier than ever before to unlock your business's potential. As a truly inclusive portal for all, your inputs are now able to reach the highest level of attention of our ANC leadership and government leaders, connecting you to an economic hub bursting with possibilities. It's a new modern look, underpinned by a traditional set of values that puts you, our subscribers, first. So, how can you be a part of it? Simple. Sign in, enter your business's details, and choose the package that best represents your company's goals. Our platform is safe, easy to use, POPIA compliant, and joining gains you access to a galaxy of benefits. From exclusive ministerial networking events to world-class webinars, workshops, skills training, trade facilitation, women in business, and so much more, the Progressive Business Forum platform becomes your gateway to a future never dreamed possible. Together, let's resolve the challenges facing our country and build a prosperous future. South Africa is ready to grow. Are you?
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this conversation hosted today and brought to you in partnership with the Progressive Business Forum and the Mail and Guardian. A timely conversation, and in fact, if one looks at the state of young people in this country, an ongoing conversation, youth participation in the economy. The picture, unfortunately, that is created by the latest statistics in terms of where young people in this country are does not create much hope. What it tells us is that the majority of young people are being excluded from the economy, especially the formal economy, and that there are no opportunities that young people can take up to be able to progressively improve and also better their lives. So the time for honest reflections on what is limiting the mainstreaming of young people into all policies, programs, and budgets of government is now. And this moment really calls for honest reflection. And I'm also hoping that this conversation will also create a platform for accountability, but most importantly, the kind of solutions that we need in order to change the state of the youth in this country and give them hope about South Africa being a country in which they belong, in which they have a claim to, and in which they are prioritized, not just as people who are on the periphery or even on the margins of our society, but that they are recognized as being full citizens who are given equal opportunity to access their rights within our country. My name is Kathy Mutlahla, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's discussion. And just to give you an idea of who you will have coming up later on in the program, let me welcome all of the guests that are part of our program today. I'm going to ask everybody to switch on their cameras. Hello, everyone. Just a quick wave for me. Hello. It's a pleasure to be in all your company today. Let me welcome Comrade Paul Mashatile. I think for the purposes of this conversation today, I can get away with calling you Comrade Paul Mashatile. He's the Treasurer General of the ANC. We also have Mr. Sipombele, the convener of the Progressive Business Forum, Mr. Hussein Kajika, who is the CEO and the Mail and Guardian of the Mail and Guardian, that is, Mr. Thobela Maponya, the head of youth. This is for the Black Business Council. Ms. Gidiboni Tsilwani, the BBC Built Environment Secretary General. Mr. Klasi Tebogo Khopa, the National Young Professional Chairperson with the Black Management Forum. Ms. Klangi Morale of the ANC Youth League. She's with the National Youth Task Team. And of course, to all the PBF subscribers and the Mail and Guardian subscribers and everybody else that is part of this conversation. You have the opportunity of joining us via multiple platforms. We're live streaming, of course, on the Mail and Guardian platform. If for whatever reason you do lose connection, you can go on over to YouTube. You should be able to access us there. The hashtags for this conversation: hashtag youth economy. You can also put in there hashtag PBF and hashtag Mail and Guardian. So that gives you a sense of what you can expect coming up on the program. Now, just in the chat line, this is where you're going to be able to ask direct questions to our panelists today. And there will be an opportunity to open up the discussion. And I think the full benefit of today can come out of having open, honest, and robust reflections on where we are and perhaps what has even led us to be in the situation. So those questions will be up in the comment section. It's on the right-hand side of the screen. You can just put it up there, and I'll certainly be keeping an eye on what you are sending through. And we'll get to that once we've given our panelists an opportunity to make their opening remarks. So without wasting much time, let me allow the convener of the Progressive Business Forum to come on and tell us exactly why they've put this event together and what it is, Mr. Sipombele, that you are hoping to achieve out of today.
Thank you, Katie. Our program director, Comrade Paul Mashatile, the Treasurer General of the African National Congress, Mr. Hussein Kajika, the CEO of Mail and Guardian, Comrade Kangi Mohale Al-Gaddafi, the ANC Youth League NYTT member, Kiriboni Tsulwane, the Secretary General of the BBC Build Environment, Mr. Thobela Maponya, the head of youth responsible in the Black Business Council, Mr. Tebogo Khopa, the National Young Professional Chairperson of the BMF, the top 200 young South Africans who are part of us, the PBF and PCF subscribers. Ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a pleasure to welcome everyone to this important joint webinar with Mail and Guardian to celebrate the Youth Month under the theme, The Year of Charlotte Maxeke, Growing Youth Employment for an Inclusive and Transformed Society. In recognition of the significant and crucial role of the youth of our country, the ANC Progressive Business Forum has partnered with Mail and Guardian, together with the PBF as a program of the ANC under the leadership of Comrade Paul Mashatile. We believe this joint webinar stands to best harness our efforts and do justice to celebrate the Youth Month. It is this virtual address on the occasion of the Youth Day when our president recalled and saluted the youth of our country and highlighted what government has done and is already doing and initiating to promote youth development. In his remarks, he said, "Our goal is to become a country where every young person has a place to go, whether in further education and training, in skills development, in work experience, in entrepreneurship, in youth service, or informal economy." In line with what the president has said, just to share with our audience, the Progressive Business Forum is a subscriber-based organization. We run various programs, including the ministerial briefings, research and roundtable discussion, business summit, skills training and development workshop, trade exhibition, trade facilitation, as we are planning to have an engagement in around July with the Kenya. We are also planning to organize the Progressive Women in Business. This is our key mandate, and our key mandate, in line with what the president has said, is to empower the South Africans, which is a critical goal. What about today's event? Today's event is aimed to educate and inform our subscribers of the power and the influence of youth in our country. But most of all, of the crucial importance is of taking a proactive steps to ensure that the youth of today can equally take up their place in the economy of our country at every level. Program Director, we will hear from young people from various organizations, the Youth Task Team, the Black Business Built Environment, the BBC, and BMF. We provided them with an opportunity to share with us about the things we can practically do to affect and enhance the role of the youth in our country. I'm reminded of the words by Carmen Martinez, who well said the following: the more we increase the active participation and partnership with young people, the better we serve them. I wish to encourage everyone today to participate actively and avail yourself for the opportunities that will be presented today, particularly by the Treasurer General of the ANC. I thank you.
Mr. Mbele. Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mbele. With that said, let me then welcome the CEO of the Mail and Guardian, Mr. Hussein Kajika, to also then give his own remarks as we continue with the program. And as the Mail and Guardian, I mean, the Young 200 South Africans is one of the initiatives in which you are amplifying the work that is being done by ordinary South Africans and celebrating young people in this country.
Thank you very much, Kathy, and welcome to everybody to the Mail and Guardian. Special welcome to Comrade TG, Paul Mashatile. When we've met on occasion, I've been threatening that the MG has to become more involved and offer these kinds of platforms for discussion. And I'm very grateful that Comrade Sipho Mbele was able to pull it off in a conversation that we had a few weeks ago. So really grateful and honored to be able to host this conversation that's going to take place in a short while. As you all know, that the youth feature extremely importantly on the radar of the MNG every year, where we showcase those young South Africans, those young bright minds out there. And this year was no different. We were completely blown away by the sort of extent, the expertise, the skill, the thought leadership that exists out there among our youth. And really, if anything, this gives great hope to the future of our country. So welcome to all of you. We hope that we are able to do justice to the discussion at hand. We are proud to be associated with the PBF. This is going to be the first of, I hope, many, many more in a series of discussions that we'll have on the sort of topics that Comrade Sipho had mentioned earlier. All I'm going to ask from all of you, and I know that the PBF is a subscriptions-based organization, so is the Mail and Guardian. And if you want to hear more about the quality or content that we are able to provide to all of you or read about it, then I have to ask you to go to our subscribe button. It's somewhere on the email that was sent to you, and subscribe to the Mail and Guardian. There are special offers on the table to you right now for you to gain access to reading all this content online and in print. So please do take up the offer. But more than that, just welcome to all of you, and I hope you have a really good discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Kajika. Well, with that said, let me welcome onto the platform to give his opening remarks, Comrade Paul Mashatile.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Can you see me? Yes. Thank you very much, Kathy. Let me greet all the panelists, this afternoon, and also all the participants. It gives me great pleasure to have the opportunity to share some thoughts with you this afternoon. This gathering obviously brings together young people who are determined to take their destiny into their own hands and to make a difference, not only in their own lives, but also in the lives of their communities. I therefore wish to assure all of you that in the ANC, you have a dependable partner who will continue to support you in your endeavors. And I want to thank the organizers, particularly Comrade Sipo, Mbele and his team, and also your partners, Mail and Guardian. Thank you very much, led by CEO Mr. Oshin Kajga. And I want to thank you, all of you, for putting this together. I think, Comrade Sipo, we should use this platform, amongst others, to revive the Progressive Youth Business Forum. And I want to begin by reiterating what our president said on Sunday when he addressed us. He said, as a country, we find ourselves in the eye of the storm, a devastating pandemic, COVID-19. By all accounts, the situation is getting worse and not better. I therefore want to urge everybody that during this period, we must once again work together to limit the spread of the virus and thus minimize its impact on the lives of our communities and our livelihood generally. I therefore urge all of you to continue wearing your mask, maintain social distancing, to wash, sanitize your hands regularly, and to avoid crowded spaces and places. Let us observe all the restrictions announced by our government. Program Director, South Africa is a useful country. Young people between the ages of 18 to 34 make up more than 35% of South Africa's total population. They are the largest population group by classification. Like the rest of the African continent, our country has a significant demographic dividend, which refers basically to the benefits that come with a large youthful population. Failure to unleash and maximize the potential of our young people will result in South Africa losing its demographic dividend. It is for this reason that we in the ANC have placed youth development and empowerment at the center of our ongoing program of social and economic transformation. We acknowledge the important role that the young people of our country played at the forefront and at the cutting edge of our struggle for liberation. As we now rebuild our country, we are determined to ensure that young people once again occupy the foremost trenches. Young people's voices must be heard, their dreams must be supported, and addressing their plight must be uppermost in our minds. We value the contribution of young people in the ongoing effort to build a South Africa of our dreams, a country we can all be proud to call home. On this most important occasion, I wish to reiterate that to us in the ANC, economic transformation is about changing the trajectory of the South African economy to be more inclusive of Black people, youth, women, and people with disabilities. We will not consider our mission to transform the economy complete unless we have succeeded ensuring that young people are the main drivers and beneficiaries of the change we want to see in our economy. In other words, the meaningful participation of young people in the economy is to us a non-negotiable. Accordingly, we are deeply concerned about the persistent and growing problem of youth unemployment. Young people continue to struggle to enter the labor market. Notable also is that the unemployment rate amongst young people is high, irrespective of the level of educational attainment. Equally worrying is that more than 10 million young people between the ages of 15 and 24 years are not in employment, in education, or training. They have simply disengaged from the formal economy. At our 54th National Conference in Nazareth in 2017, we deliberated extensively on the plight of young people of our country. We agreed, among others, that one of the critical interventions we need to make to fully exploit the energies of young people for greater good of our society is to invest in their education. This we will do as part of our overall commitment to launching a skills revolution of our country so that desperate needs to advance to higher levels of development. It is for this reason education and skills development remain the single most important investment of our government. It is the single most important investment our government is making to advance youth development and empowerment. We are clear in our minds that educated individuals are able to participate more fully in the labor market and in the economy generally. Equally, children of educated parents are likely themselves to acquire more education. Education, therefore, fits into a virtuous circle that ultimately benefits society as a whole. We are therefore determined as an ANC to ensure that young people are equipped with skills they need to be absorbed into a fast-changing economy and world of work. We remain committed to the goal of equal quality education for all, assured in the knowledge that education is the greatest equalizer. Specifically, we have resolved to introduce programs to prepare learners, especially those in public schools and in rural areas, for the fourth industrial economy. This includes teaching digital skills to learners at the young age. Equally important gains are being made toward our commitment to providing free education to poor and working class students. The government is working with all stakeholders to find solutions to the critical issue of the student debt. Program Director, we are also committed to providing adequate funding for TVET, community education, and other skills sectors. These components of our education system play a vital role in empowering millions of young people, as well as providing opportunities for skill development, lifelong learning, adult education, and literacy. We are, however, also encouraged that some of the interventions implemented as part of the economic reconstruction announced by the President, reconstruction and recovery plan, are yielding results to the benefit of the young people. I won't go into details about all of them. Some are the presidential employment stimulus, which to date have benefited more than 300,000 education assistants and placed in over 20,000 of them across schools in the country. The income support is being provided to more than 125,000 workers in the early childhood development sector. More than 50,000 opportunities have been created in public employment programs in the environmental sector, and more than 100,000 small-scale and subsistence farmers are being provided with support. Program Director, we also know that significant progress has been made to support industrialization and to rebuild the local manufacturing industry. We view this as an important intervention in supporting local industries and creating decent, sustainable jobs, especially for young people. Ultimately, the goal is to create the necessary conditions for local industries to grow in a manner that is labor absorbing, including for young entrants into the labor market. We also welcome the commitment by government at all levels to set aside 30% of total procurement for youth-owned enterprises. Ladies and gentlemen, while government continues to take decisive steps to promote the inclusion of young people in the economy, we must emphasize that youth development goes beyond the scope of government. It requires the NGO sector, the private sector, and other institutions, including research institutions. Another important intervention aimed at advancing youth participation in the economy is to harness young people's entrepreneurial spirit. Many young people have great and innovative business ideas. They need to be supported. In this regard, we urge government to strengthen incubation programs targeting youth-owned businesses. We must also be deliberate in ensuring that businesses owned by young people are integrated into major value and supply chains in our country and also across our continent and the world. Linked to this is the work we must do collectively as the public and private sectors to expand access to funding for youth-owned businesses. We must make it easier for young people to access finance and capital in order to start and grow their businesses. In this regard, we are proposing that new technologies such as fintech be used to allow for alternative risk assessment models to determine a young entrepreneur's likelihood of repaying a loan, eliminating the need for recorded credit histories and collateral. In conclusion, Program Director, I'd like once more to say we in the African National Congress have always believed that the youth are our future, and accordingly we will do everything necessary to support their development, including supporting their meaningful participation in all sectors of the economy. I therefore wish this engagement a huge success. And as I conclude, allow me to say young people to the forefront. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mashatile, thank you so much for those remarks. And of course, there'll be an opportunity later to have a discussion about the extent to which young people have truly been brought to be front and center of the policies that you were reflecting and referencing just a short while ago. Let me then move on and invite our panelists to give you their opening remarks. Again, just 5 minutes for the panelists to be able to do that, so that we've got plenty of time to actually have engagements on the subject. Let me begin by welcoming Ms. Hlangi Mogale, who is with the ANC Youth League, and she is with the National Youth Task Team. Ms. Mogale, good morning. Or good afternoon, actually. It's 1 o'clock already, lunchtime. Hello. Please unmute yourself, Ms. Mogale.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
I hope I'm audible, Kathy.
Go ahead.
Can I proceed? Okay. Thank you very much, Kathy, and good afternoon to yourself and all the participants, the panelists that have been invited. But firstly, let me just observe my protocols and appreciate the presentation that was made by the Treasurer General, and appreciate his presence to the panel discussion, and also appreciate the convener of the Progressive Business Forum for having organized this dialogue, a necessary one, in fact. And just say, Kathy, as members of the ANC Youth League, and practitioners and scholars of sustainable development, we appreciate the importance of having these dialogues. And as the African National Congress Youth League, I think we've been at the forefront of actually hosting this kind of dialogues, and going to an extent of hosting demonstrations, to express our frustrations around the issues of youth participation in the mainstream economic activities of this country. So one would love to appreciate this opportunity and just say, perhaps it is about time that as a country we start reflecting honestly and engaging on a possibility of completely implementing things that we always discuss and talk about. I think as young people in this country, we are going through what we call a dialogue fatigue, Kathy, and we've agreed to be part of this dialogue because we understand the role that we play as the African National Congress Youth League in shaping the discourse and actually shaping, this country to a certain direction. But we're going through what we call a fatigue, a dialogue fatigue, because I think we've been speaking for a very long time. When the democratic dispensation happened in 1994, we believed that it was a political breakthrough, and we're entering into a second phase of the struggle, which was more economic than anything, and that we'll start speaking about seeing results, start speaking about, how far the progress that we've made in implementing some of the policies, the radical policies that as the ANC Youth League we've come up with, and other youth formations have come up with, to say we've propagated for these youth policies, developmental policies, but how far are we in as far as our implementation is concerned? And I think we are found wanting in that space. So we're invited to come and speak about the youth participation in the economy. And we do this during the month of June, where we have to commemorate and celebrate, the strides that were made by the youth of 1976, and of course measure their efforts and strides against those that represent the youth of 2021, and what exactly do we stand for. Unfortunately, we celebrate the Youth Month, during a very gloomy era and a time where we are going through a very brutal pandemic, which is COVID-19. So I want to do my opening by giving a sort of a historical context, because in the ANC Youth League, we've been taught that for us to know where we are going, we have got to be able to appreciate where we're coming from. And the reason why we need to always go back and give historical context to the discussions that would obviously culminate to where we are today in as far as youth developmental issues are concerned. We need to look into those. We come from a history where inequality has been at the center, and young people have always been at the very bottom of the value chain, Kathy. And when we are invited to come and speak on youth participation in the economy, something that is completely non-existent in our country, it's a very difficult topic to actually take in, because we are not having a frank conversation. In fact, the discussion should be, why are young people, why is the youth not actively involved in the mainstream economy of this country? And I think we need to move away from trying to mask our difficulties, our challenges. Amilcar Cabral says it very clearly that we must not mask our difficulties. And therefore, as this country, we need to be honest in our conversations. We need to be honest in our dialogues to say, there is absolutely no youth participation in the mainstream economy of this country. We know why. We know how it started, and we know how the minority, white privileged, continue to benefit from the mainstream economy of this country. Some through the BEE policies that we've come up with. We thought they will be a resolution, but we've seen how, in fact, white privately owned companies have been fronting and defrauding the state by using and bringing black faces, but not actually being the black faces, not being the owners of those companies. So you have a phenomenon where there's fronting and there's masking of the truth, and we are afraid to speak about it. Just a month ago, the ANC Youth League engaged on a march. We called it a PYA march to Treasury, because we've identified our government as also a catalyst in the process and struggle to liberate young people in this country. Treasury must come to part, and they must contribute to taking away the burden on our shoulders as young people in this country. So we embarked on that march, and our demands were very clear. We've demanded that we need austerity measures to be taken out, because there seemed to be a misalignment in terms of our policy, our government policy, and and the plans that government also have. We cannot be speaking about budget cuts and speak about creating jobs at the same time. We cannot speak about cutting budgets in health and speaking about how we're going to fight COVID at the same time. So there seemed to be some form of a misalignment. And the reason we went to Treasury is because we've identified it as one of the forces that must help us in fighting this injustice that has been happening in this country. We have been very clear as the ANC Youth League to say that we demand that austerity measures must be cut off. We demand jobs for young people. We demand that quality education. We demand that there's got to be an end to the gender pay gaps. The fact that women continue to be subjugated in a democratic South Africa, and that the inequality in the paychecks continues to exist unabated in this country. And we've also demanded that we want minimum wages. We want decent jobs, because young people, there's been policies that have been developed. And as the ANC Youth League, one of the issues we need to target and interrogate from the national youth policies, it's the interventionist approaches that have been proposed to say that to address issues of unemployment, which is at a staggering 74%, we need to create EPWP works, jobs. I think for the immediate, perhaps we could consider that, but we need sustainable jobs. We need decent jobs. We need decent wages for young people in this country. And how do we do that? How do we break the barriers into the mainstream economy? How do we say we have created minimum decent jobs and we've integrated young people into the mainstream economy? We need to tap into the productive sector. We need to start thinking about serious economic sectors where young people can play a meaningful role, not cleaning papers in streets and paying them 3,000 and thinking that we've created jobs for young people. We need to tap into the productive sector. We need to look into the mining sector. We need to look into the manufacturing sector. We need to understand that those are the biggest contributors to our GDP, but who are the players? If we're to do a breakdown and we look at the ownership patterns, who are the owners of these companies? And to what extent are we integrating young people? In terms of our education, to what extent are we educating and preparing young Black people to actually be able to compete at that level? We've seen the quarter one labor market survey, and it's very clear that out of the unemployment pool of young people that is there, Black people are in the majority. They're in the majority, and most of them, the biggest contributors to unemployment is education. So we also need, and it's one of the reasons, one of the issues that the ANC Youth League has been advocating for, that we need, yes, our government has been fighting to access education, but the quality of education that we are putting forward, we need quality education that is going to be made available for our people. And also the curriculum, we need to look at the kind of curriculum so that we're able to match the skills, the global standards of doing things. How do we break the digital divide? How do we prepare our people in schools so that when they come out, they are ready to compete at the level where, other young people in other global developed countries are at? And also speak to the artificial intelligence, that the 4R, the fourth industrial revolution that we're finding ourselves in. How do we prepare our young people through education, through quality education, to be able to compete at that level, but most importantly, to be irreplaceable? Because we've seen the trend of, big companies and corporates cutting jobs because there's the artificial intelligence that, is upon us, that we need to fight. And we also need to look into, to say, part of the reasons why we are at a staggering 74% unemployment rate today is because there have been job losses in the banking sector, where when you go to a bank now, you only find one teller because really there's no need. The digital space and the migration, therefore, how do we migrate with it? How do we ensure that young people, in our schools are prepared for that? But just to go back to the productive sectors, which are very critical to, getting young people really and truly participating in the youth, in the economic activities of this country. I think as young people of this country, we need to send a very strong message to our government. We support and respect our government, but I think the old must allow the young to be born. I think those that are leading us in government must allow young people to take up their space. I think we also need to tap into the private sector space and say, out of the millions that they are sucking out of our government, how much are they contributing in the social responsibility programs? How many young people are absorbed by these private sectors? And to what extent are they actually assisting? I know there is a YES program that the president launched, I think in 2017. We need to look at the figures because the figures are very stubborn. How many young people has the Youth Employment Service been able to absorb and place in the various work environments? And we know that at the center of the YES program, private sector is supposed and expected to play a role. Have they been playing that role? And what is it that we're prepared to do to push and remind private sector that they're in this country to do the work, to make profits, but also contribute to the growth of this country? I can see, because you're coming up, it means that I must quickly wrap up, Kathy. In the opening of this program, I heard something which is very profound to say: our fortitude and willingness to unite as a country, it's what will bring us to take us to the promised land. But I feel that the unity of this country must start with admitting that an injustice has been made to young people in this country, and it's about time. This is the decade of the youth. It is about time that young people are placed correctly, are given what is theirs. And if government is not playing part, if the private sector is not playing part, I think the ANC Youth League needs to engage on more of those visits to our government, but most importantly to the private sector. The old must die and allow the young to be born. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Morale. Already we're seeing quite a number of questions coming through for you just based on the statement that you've given this afternoon. Let me welcome Ms. Kidiboni Tsilwane. She is the Youth Secretary General of the BBCBE.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you once again for this opportunity, and I'd like to observe our protocol. I come in my capacity as the Secretary General of the BBCBE Youth Chamber, and we are actively in the built environment. And as we are probably all aware, the construction industry and the built environment by and large has been largely impacted by COVID-19, and it being one of the biggest employers in the country, this has had severe impact, and that is why also we see our stats being so high in terms of unemployment. That has also contributed, but also the businesses, the construction businesses, the consulting and material supply businesses that have been affected by this. But I would like to take a lot from what Comrade Al-Gaddafi said, because there's a lot of important things that were raised, a lot of very, very interesting things and very practical things that were said by her that really need to be adapted, or we have to look at how we are progressing in this country. And I mean, when we look at Youth Month, we look at the youth that 45 years ago were brave enough to stand up, roll up their sleeves and get to work and do what they believed in. It is now time for our youth of today to roll up their sleeves as well, and we start working towards our economic emancipation. And I believe that is our responsibility. And I know that we face countless challenges in this country, and it is very important that we do acknowledge, we do identify these opportunities, but we also look at some of the solutions, be solution-based in our thinking, and what is it that we can do from a social perspective, but also economical, in order for us to make sure that some of these solutions come from us as young people. I mean, I come from a business perspective and from a business background. And when my sister and I started our brick manufacturing plant, we did this because we identified a huge problem. We looked for young Black-owned brick manufacturers, particularly women-owned, that were formerly in the mainstream economy, and we struggled to find that. And when we made the decision to enter into this industry, we knew that there would be challenges, but we were not prepared for the type of challenges that were there. I mean, we had to start believing in ourselves at a very young age. We'd walk into some boardrooms where we were the only woman who'd be in there, would either be taking minutes or making coffee. And we quickly realized that the business world was not going to welcome us with open arms. The criticism, the rejections, and the outright, no, you will not prosper in this industry, were all there. And we had to look at those type of problems or challenges that we were facing to say, how do we then turn this around in order to create opportunities, in order for us to create an industry where other women can come after us? And I believe those are some of the things that, some of the conversations that we should be having together with some of the key challenges that have been identified to say, how are we as young people coming up with solutions? How are we as business people, young business people who are seeing some of the challenges, making sure that we pave the way, make the changes now and make the sacrifices now, so that when the next generation of young Black business people come into the industry, they don't have to go through some of the things we are not going through because of the sacrifices that were made by the youth of 1974. There's so many things that we can pick up and say, what is it that we can change with the problems that we have identified? And in my personal opinion, and the journey that we're walking as young women entrepreneurs, some of the big 5 challenges, in my opinion, are access to market. It is lack of funding, business funding. There's excessive red tape in every single industry, and construction is not an exception. There's lack of business acumen, and what I probably should have started with, lack of discipline by us as entrepreneurs as well. Before we avail the market and we avail funding, it is important that we also invest in the entrepreneur, the person themselves, because it is important that while we do look at what government is not doing or what government can do better, it is also important that we introspect. There's success stories that we look at, such as Drip that comes to mind, and Batu. And a lot of people look at these individuals and say they're lucky or they're standing from a perspective of privilege. But we forget the amount of work that goes into today as recognizing Batu as one of the success stories of young Black-owned businesses. And the discipline that has taken that business to get to where it is what each and every one of us need to instill in ourselves in terms of how we run our businesses, how we go through our studies. There's so many challenges that start with us fixing our own internal discipline. And I believe some of our young people are finding themselves in a situation where they're challenged because of the fact that internally there's a lot of things that could change before we look at some of the things like funding and market, because you as an entrepreneur are what's driving the business as well. As an individual are what is driving the change in whatever industry you're in. When I am in my hat as the Secretary General of the Black Business Council, the conversations that we have are creating an environment together with government and private sector, creating an environment in the built environment specifically, where entrepreneurs and young people, professionals and students can see hope in the industry. Right now, we've got infrastructure rollouts of billions that are going to take place, and some have already even started, where we are actively asking, where are the young people? Where is the set aside? Where's the training opportunities? There are many institutions of government and private sector that are rolling out projects that are stimulating the economy by their projects in order to recover from the hard time that is still in place through the lockdowns. And when we look at the role of young people, we often are met with, I will call it disappointment for lack of a better word, because we then have people who are sitting and saying, where is this opportunity? Where's this opportunity? But when it is time to stand up and put in that hard work and that tenacity, we then see that gap. And I mean, there's something important that the Treasurer General spoke of that is very, very, I believe, has been missing in business, is we need the role of incubating, business incubating, to be highlighted from a government perspective as well, because there's a lot of opportunities that are out there, but we do not fulfill them adequately because we might not have the understanding and acumen of business, and we need to also understand the impact of COVID. It sounds like an unending story or an excuse even when we talk about the impact of COVID has had on businesses. And looking again at the industry I'm in and also other industries, you see how hard it is for businesses to recover, but also to withstand what has taken place. I mean, when we opened our branch in Gauteng, we opened the country's first plastic brick manufacturing plant as young Black women. And a month before then we did infrastructure and machinery into the plant, and then we had to close down due to the lockdown, and we went for months without an income. During that time is where we then had to sit down and go back to our business incubation trainings, looking at strategy, looking at where we're going forward. And all of that is how we were able to go through the painful period of no income, no activity in the market. And I think it's important that us as young people as well put our hands up, put in that hard work, go through some of these key business incubation, business learnings. And it does not have to be a formal program that you pay for and that you win in a competition. It is simply when you are on the internet, go on those YouTube channels and look at what is sales management, what is business management. It's small things like that even in our personal spaces, we can make changes in how we impact the economy, because I can tell you now, the mainstream economy is not going to hold your hand and say, let me create an opportunity for you. It's us coming to the table with our opportunities, with the value that we create, and we say, this is what we're adding to the economy. And you will then, by virtue of that, become a valuable instrument and be able to then create a difference. I mean, we're having conversations right now through the PBF, and we're sitting around the table with very, very important people who have impact on what's happening in the progress of our country. It is important that we start defining active measures where business, young people can have an active role. I thank you, Kathy.
Kidiboni, thank you so much for that. And it certainly is helpful to hear part of the experience from a young entrepreneur who has been in what is a very difficult environment and sector to try and break through to. Just a very gentle reminder to the rest of the panelists. Please, let's keep an eye on that clock. With that said, let me welcome Mr. Klasi Tebohopa. He is with the National Young Professional Chairperson at the Black Management Forum. Mr. Hopa, over to you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Allow me to pass my winter greetings to everyone on this very special labeled month of the Youth Month, which is a reflection of what June of 1976 did. They have actually alienated and forced literature Africana learning education policy. So us in the Black Management Forum, young professionals, we are still committed in the creation of fundamental economic social change for the benefit of all young professionals and endeavors to unite them in taking their rightful place in the economic affairs of South Africa. For our young Africans, economic exclusion is a common and a lucky blue sky in South Africa. Black young people, South Africans today, have always been excluded from participating in the meaningful economy. In this country, we're in the minority, of which are controlling the majority economically, merely because of the Dendel policies they've crafted that had managed to advance them in the expense of the majority. So we must act addressing into these injustices of the past. The injustices of the past stipulate and perpetuate our lives as young people today in this democratic country. It is very painful to be a young person indeed. Post-1994, not only were Africans allowed to participate in the economy, but the Black man and woman who could have become whatever or she has aspired to become. We were informed that education was a key to success. We tend in becoming Zulia. We have acquired education, and key question remaining is that, are we successful? Most young people don't have access to post-qualifications. The curricula becomes too expensive, and while NSFAS has policy positions in funding post-qualifications, affirmative action and BEE opened up the market for Black people to be employed and incentivized companies who hire Black professionals. But we have observed that throughout the years, there is a serious reverse and transformation, and specifically to the young professionals, who are also highly skilled in having compete for space with older Black generations due to the economy which refuses to transform any further. Now we have a problem of young Black professionals who have skills but cannot utilize them because they are told that they are overqualified without experience. The problem we're having is local investment strike in SA. We took our eyes to look into the international investors. And when they don't arrive, we turn and blame politicians. We mostly hear about the stats of how young people are unemployed, and we don't hear how many are not employed and are not employable. There should be a certain statistical classification to count unemployability to be on a separate stats so that we can get to understand why they are not employable and how can the government assist them to equate into the labor market. The young continued to receive secondary educations, and some of the grade 12 don't get opportunity and access to study tertiary educations. And they also don't get jobs. So in other way, they remain unemployed and a burden to the nation. The output from the university is graduating and not getting jobs. Some get skills development programs for 12 months, but such trainings, they don't seek employment, and in this empty land, there's no employment. While other young people grow in areas which don't even have economic activities, which they're stuck in their livelihood and idling there. The report indicates that only 9.2% of South African youth are involved in experiential activities, and majority of them are not even listed as a corporate on JSE. We also note that there is still a lack of Black ownership in large entities such as agriculture, transportation, and finance. The South African youth lack opportunities to participate openly into the economic mainstream, and in such regard, they remain becoming the consumers of the economy. The foreign nationals appear to have occupied the business space and employable because they're providing cheap labor and the market uncontested, while they remain our brothers and sisters. It is time for South African youth to actually utilize the service product and the marketing as how they do. When they go cheaper, also go cheaper and compete with them in that level. To us, and also the young entrepreneurs, be highly involved into the economy. We need financing institutions which are lower and are having an easy access to financing. Government will create entrepreneur incubation program across the provinces, create a pipeline and advancement of an open opportunities for young entrepreneurs. Young people should create corporates that are actually prevailing to the age group that provide share capital, and they get involved in the purchases of the private equity. As the young professionals who are proposing 30% on boards establishment and appointments to be made for qualifying young people under the age of 35. The proposal across the state-owned enterprises into the country to assist in alleviating this inequality that Black young professionals continue to be subjected to. In closing, we have identified some of these challenges because majorly some of the companies of young people were dealt with by COVID, whereby they have battled to even come back. COVID has disturbed many companies, has actually made other companies to go closer. So my fellow young professionals, the people of South Africa today, they need to empower us. Black entrepreneurs should also be assisted in investing in innovation, and young people should participate. There should be entrepreneurship colleges across the board as businesses wishing to the modules, which can help to redesign the SME focus and development of an incubations across the board. We have been observing and seeking an intervention injection that will provide the economic opportunities and transform the country. Our older people should also assist, not in closing the gaps for the young people, but assist in inclusion of them. Because the problem of this country is not only policies, but it is also with older people who are occupying positions, who are continuing to employ people that are older than the age of 35. And this is what we're seeking, a transformation from the older people from the first. My last message to every young professionals and every people in South Africa: young people, don't be discouraged. Be the current situations, beat it. It is too tough for most of us. It is important to stay focused and remain determined to the journey of our success. I thank you.
Mr. Khopa, thank you so much for those statements. And the final panelists who will be given an opportunity to also make their remarks in front of the audience today will be Mr. Thobela Maponya. He's the head of youth at the Black Business Council. I'm also noting a lot of the questions and comments that you've already started putting through in our chat group, and we'll certainly provide an opportunity for the different panelists to respond. And if there's anyone in particular that you would want to respond to your question, please indicate as much in the comment section. With that said, Mr. Maponya, it's over to you.
Greetings to the Comrade TG, greetings to the leadership of the PBF and Mail and Guardian as well, and everybody that is joining us today. Kathy, it seems like I'll be the only one doing a presentation today. I'll just go quickly to it and make sure that I go swiftly through it without stealing any of your time. When we were nurtured through the structures, we were told also to make sure that we put also stoppers on our side so that we are able to monitor this time. So I'll try and make sure that I don't steal any of your time. But yes, my name is Thobela Maponya, the chairperson of the Black Business Council Youth Portfolio Committee. And before me is a presentation that I had prepared for the session today. The Black Business Council, yes, is an independent member-based organization that is an overarching confederation that represents Black professionals, Black associations and chambers. And we have then our proper mandate and priority purpose being of advocacy and lobby that we do. The Youth Portfolio Committee structure was launched within the current term of the current leadership of the BBC, led by the NOBs, being the president, within that being Sandile Zungu. And the structure of the Youth Portfolio Committee was then put in such a way that we are able then to tackle some of the SMME and skills development challenges that we have, and focus also on some of the economic clusters that we believe that we needed to tackle and narrow actually our approach in terms of what we wanted to do and achieve as well within that. And also we have then in there the financial cluster and the portfolio that looks after the programs and projects that we do run. We have a good support from the BBC Secretariat Office under the Office of the CEO as well. Currently, we do have partnerships and MOUs that we have. I will not go deeper into this. Kathy, program director, when we were given the mandate and called through, we were told to speak about the youth participation in mainstream economy. And part of the issues that we felt that we needed to address was part of the myriad of challenges that we see young people facing in South Africa currently. And some of the submissions that as the BBC we've been able to make and advance some of the policies that we have in South Africa at the moment. And part of those that we will then be speaking to is youth unemployment, and there are no enforceable mechanisms to support implementation of preferential employment and procurement for designated groups, being women, youth, and persons with disability, and also inadequate resourced youth structures that we have that are also ineffective in their way that they are structured, and accounting officers that are held to no accountability when it comes to transformation. And part of the interventions, if we go into the interventions of unemployment that we've been able to make submissions on, and also would want to raise for young people to be able also to be challenged and also probably think about when they are in the different formations, is that one was the increased opportunity for quality post-school skills training for all. We have a need in South Africa to ensure that there are schools of excellence and TVETs colleges that are established even in the semi-developed and rural areas, and also to develop a comprehensive plan in respect to the historic debt that young people find themselves, because we've seen how much of a challenge that the historic debt causes for those that have finished their qualifications but cannot get their certificates or diplomas or degrees based on the fact that they do have those historic debts. One of the interventions that we spoke to and made submissions to, and what part of our professionals have also made submissions to, is the introduction of a universal basic income for unemployed youth. This, we believe, will support youth to transition into employment or also into entrepreneurship, and will afford them the opportunity to have the resources, as we've seen with the current economy that we face, that young people do not have the means and the resources for them to be able to transition into either employment, whether they need to make submissions for those jobs, or even transition into entrepreneurship. One of the interventions when it comes to unemployment was the review and the restructure of the public employment schemes. Currently, we do have the EPWP and the CWP programs that we have, but for us, they're not linked towards the participants' skills, and they're not also linked to any of the structured exit opportunities. And with that, we find young people coming into these programs and exiting these programs, having done either jobs that were not adequate to their skills that they have, and post that there's no exit opportunities, and they find themselves in the same position that they went into these programs. One of the challenges that we made submissions to is to say, as industries and skills advance with the 4IR and technologies, we need to be able to know how to protect the valuable, vulnerable jobs that are out there. We've seen how some of the even shops, outlets that sell food, when they've changed even their teller systems, where some of the young people have suffered from job losses based on how technology has impacted. But for us, we see that there is a gap in the skills transitioning and upskilling and training for the jobs of the future, so that we don't get to lose jobs as we incorporate as well the technology and 4IR that we speak of. The intervention number 2 that we speak to is the preferential employment and procurement for designated groups. And as you'd know, youth encompasses all designated groups, whether it being women, whether it being young males, whether it being persons with disabilities that are out there within our societies. So which is why we encompass it within all the designated groups that are out there within our society. Part of the interventions, number 1, is to implement and monitor the 30% set aside for employment of youth in all the government institutions at all levels at all spheres of government, either it being at national, provincial, and local government, that there must be a 30% employment set aside target that must be encompassed by government within the workforce. Number 2 is that we need to ensure that within the procurement regimes that we have, and they get to change. And part of that is that this we've been able to actually achieve even as the BBC. If you go to the current National Youth Policy 2020-2030, there is now an element of entrepreneurship that speaks to 30% youth procurement regime change at all organs of state. And the current challenge that we faced, and we saw that it was a hindrance that was also affecting the gains of BEE and also the gains of preferential procurement, was that the word black was the one that was being challenged by those that were challenging how the procurement was taking place. And based on the constitution that we have in South Africa, based on procurement, which says that procurement needs to be fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective. But what we've seen then is that the moment that what we need to advance as young people at this moment, in order for us to get that pre-qualification and be able to get set aside of the procurement jobs that we need to have, is to ensure that we can remove the word black and then be able then to have a pre-qualification that only allows young people to benefit from all those procurement jobs that will be created. Post the pre-qualification, once the jobs, once the bid have closed, then the BEE laws can come into effect in terms of how black you are, whether you are BEE level 1 or level 5, or you don't even have a BEE score, and that will be measured from there. Part of what we've done as well, program director, is to work on the youth integrated youth development program that then speaks to the interventions that I just spoke of now to increase economic participation, ownership, access to resources, opportunities, and wage equality for women, youth, and persons with disabilities. And these percentages that are reflected here are currently being gazetted, and we would implore on every young person to go and make submissions and ensure that we do get this passed through the IYDS, that is currently the Youth Integrated Strategy that is within the NYDA at the moment. Intervention number 3, as I move closer to my closing, is the youth development structures and the effective youth machinery. These are the current youth machineries that we have in government, from the presidency up until the ANYDA. And we've seen that all of them, and most of them, as even the Comrade TG had mentioned, that we needed to revive the Progressive Youth Business Forum that is out there. All of these structures have not been working. It is our call that we make recommendations that currently, as the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability has been granted the custodianship over youth development, we need to have a structure that is solid, that is going to advance youth development. At this moment, it is all over the show. None of the structures are functioning. There is even a new structure that was pronounced in 2020 of the Presidential Youth Employment Intervention, whereas we have a myriad of structures in the country right now that seem to cause confusion and do not have any budgeting and capacity within all those structures. We need to focus our resources within a proper structure that will lead youth. And we've seen that the moment it is government-led, it becomes a problem. We need to champion it as young people, as social partners, so that we can drive the narrative of that agenda. Intervention number 4, as I move to my closing, is that there is no accountability for transformation within those that are at the executive levels of government. We implore on National Treasury to look at the current youth policy that has been passed and to ensure that they are able then to push for the set-asides that we've gazetted for, and to ensure that from an employment and procurement perspective, they are able then, of those that are within those executive authorities, to pass through and are measured on all their performance planning and the APPs that they would have. In summary, even if you look at now the current BEE Commission's status, you'd see that even one of their key interventions, as it put there in the block, it says that in addition to the need to revise the preferential procurement framework legislation, preferential procurement is a key driver for economic transformation and should be made a standing deliverable on all organs of state and public entities in their annual performance plans and reporting on various portfolio committees. For as long as we would not be able to address the issues that we've been able to address on our side, we believe that youth development and our mainstream economic participation will continue to be at a detriment that it is in. But for us to be able to address that and change the current stage or change the current picture of how youth development is, we need to be able to address the current issues that we've been able to raise today. And in closing, Kathy, I'd like to actually even call upon the youth formations that are out there and say, probably it is about time that we go on together and stop working in silos and be able to sign a social compact as all youth formations and take it to the presidency, take it to National Treasury, and be able to put a clear plan that would highlight all the interventions that we want to have, all the execution plans that we want to have, and be able to then say youth must not be, as we sit now with a decade of a policy that is going to sit before us till 2030, we must not see the current policy collect dust whilst it has correct implementations and interventions within there that we work so hard to ensure that they drive economic inclusion and more so mainstream economic inclusion. Thank you, Kathy.
Mr. Maponya, thank you so much for that address. I should have known that my panelists could not be trusted when it came to 5 minutes of opening remarks. I'm just looking at the time. It means that we're left with very little time in order to allow for engagements. And I think what Mr. Maponya was saying towards the end of his address is quite important. The ability of the young people in this country to be able to speak together in a unified voice and represents what are the common interests of the collective is certainly an important place that I think would create so much more opportunity and possibility if it were indeed to be achieved. And I think that that's a challenge that should certainly be taken up. Let me go to the question and comment section. I had a number of questions of my own, but I think the best thing to do, given the time constraints that we're facing, is for me to take the questions from those that are part of the discussion that they have posted on our comments section. I'm going to ask our technical team, if you can please put all the speakers back up on the window for me so that I can see if there are particular people or particular panelists that want to respond to some of the questions that may come up. So let me begin with this one, and it is from Sange Jalisa, and Sange is talking about the PBF's subscription fees. He says they're quite exorbitant, especially for young and unemployed people, as we don't have access to events like this simply because we cannot afford to subscribe. What is the plan on, and he's asking there, what is the government's plan on producing more Black industrialists as a result in terms of ensuring greater job creation? To the Treasurer General of the ANC, this is from Bulelani Mbovu. He says, we have beautiful policies, but we fail dismally with the implementation. The ANC is failing us as young people. The ANC must speed up the implementation of the policies that are in favor of the youth. And let me just take a third one here. Likohonolo Lehana says, despite government investments, so it is crucial to understand what interventions are working, but how do we evaluate whether youth employment programs are successful, particularly when unemployment is caused by the structure of the economy? So I'll take one more, and again addressed to the Treasurer General of the ANC, Comrade Paul Mashatile. Why has the ANC delayed the process of radical economic transformation? There's a huge gap in municipalities, and this gap is created by a corrupt tender system. We need to start by employing the youth in strategic positions in municipalities. There are no senior members of government that will recognize or relate with the youth. So what changes is the ANC and government making to ensure that young people are absorbed into these municipalities? So those are just some of the questions and comments that we will begin with. I think maybe what I will do is give the Treasurer General an opportunity to respond to the direct questions, and then I'll ask Mr. Mbele to take the one on the PBF subscription fees and creating greater access.
Am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Yes, firstly, on the issue of not implementing policy, we have identified that problem ourselves as the ANC. You will see that in many of our recent utterances, even as late as the NEC's meetings, just even before COVID, we were lamenting the fact that we are slow on implementation, and we now need to focus on implementation because we've got a lot of good policies. So I think that's a fair point, that we do have a lot of good policies, and we need to be able to now focus on accelerating implementation by all structures of government and state institutions. So we don't want to look at empowerment of young people only through a particular institution. I know there are institutions that are focusing on young people, but our approach is that all government departments must have programs for young people, must have opportunities for young people. I know that some of the comments here are raising the issue of experience, that when government jobs are advertised, you are then told about 5 years experience, which young people don't have. And I think someone says, why don't you abolish this requirement? My approach is that, yes, experience is important, but we need to create opportunities for young people to, even during the course of study, as they are still training, to be able to come into the system as interns, be able to learn and acquire that experience. And I think there are in some areas where government has relaxed these requirements in particular kind of jobs. So as for I would say, Kathy, let me accept that, yes, implementation must be fast-tracked, I agree. Corruption in tenders. The question was that we are unable to fast-track radical economic processes because of corruption in tenders. And this problem is not just in municipalities, as it's said now. I think the issue of looking at the tenders should be across government. I know the president recently, in discussion with us, was raising the issue that there are jobs in government and municipalities that don't require to be outsourced. And that's where you need to start. There are services that government requires, that government can itself be able to get those services provided. So the tender system must be made more transparent. I know that there are provinces like Gauteng that came up with what they call open tender system. I'm not sure if they've done an evaluation of how effective it is working, but there was an attempt to say, let's be open when we want services. So they introduced what was called the open tender system. I think that's was one of the ways in which they wanted to deal with this issue of, things being done under the table. Let's be transparent. But I also want to say, I think it's important for a government not to outsource everything. There are things that government must take responsibility for, to employ people, including young people, and not in jobs that are not important. I think Frankie said earlier that young people are given jobs to pick up papers. That's not what we're advocating for. We do want young people in the productive sector of the economy, mining, financial services. My approach is that let's open opportunities for young people everywhere. Thank you very much, Kate.
Mr. Mbele?
Thank you, Katie. And we have designed programs of PBF so that they can be accessible, particularly for business, starting from small business. We have reduced the amounts to 5,000 Rand so that those who want to join as business. But we also have a program under PBF, which is called the Progressive Citizens Forum. Actually, the TG has given us a mandate as PBF that we need to start promoting the work of the Progressive Citizens Forum. Progressive Citizens Forum is targeting ordinary men and women who may not belong to any organizations, who don't own any companies, but who are activists. We have created that program. There's a minimum fee to become a subscriber, and you'll also be invited to attend the ANC engagement with the ministers. You'll also be invited to make inputs into the ANC policies. That Progressive Citizens Forum will start with a minimum of 100 Rand, and you'll be invited to engage with the ministers. The TG will always host engagement with various individuals on policy issues. You'll also be allowed to contribute as we are preparing for ANC policy conferences. You can also through the Progressive Citizens Forum. So that is a program that is designed for ordinary men and women. We have subscribers. The second one, which the TG has given us clear directives. And I want to call upon all the young people and various youth organizations to join us as we revive the progressive youth in business. The advantage of the progressive youth in business is that, as Mr. Maponya has said, it will be a parliament of young people talking about issues of business, not tenders, but how we can empower, train, and skill young people. So in the coming months, under the leadership of the Treasurer General of the ANC, we'll announce those programs. So we want ANC programs, particular PBF, Progressive Citizens Forum, and progressive youth in business to be accessible to ordinary men and women. It must not be programs of the elites. Thank you.
Let me take a couple of more questions that have come in through the comment sections. Comrade Al Gaddafi, the ANC Youth League task team is not visible on the ground. Can you explain how the ordinary youth can recognize the Youth League on the ground? How long will it take for the Youth League to be visible? The other question is that the majority of young people who are unemployed do not have tertiary education. We have a challenge there. What is the NYTT plan with that? And I suppose one of the follow-up questions in particular to what the Treasurer General of the ANC was saying around implementation is that, where then is accountability for the lack of implementation? Because we talk about all departments being tasked with the mandate of prioritizing the agenda of empowering youth and mainstreaming youth into the economy. But the fact that that is not happening, who must be held accountable for that? So perhaps, Ms. Morale, if I can come to you. Mr. Maponya, I'll come to you in a second. Please unmute yourself. You're still muted.
Thanks, Kathy. I think the question that comes on the absence of the ANC Youth League and that it's not seen, it's not on the ground. It's a fair assessment because I think the ANC Youth League is going through a renewal process. I think we are from a very difficult past as the ANC Youth League, where we were sort of moribund, for lack of a better word. Comrade TG and his collective in the ANC have actually been assisting the ANC to try and resuscitate and take forward the struggles of young people. So we've had our first meetings of the National Youth Task Team, and there are programs in place that we have planned. We've already embarked on the PYA march. But obviously, because of the strict COVID regulations, we are unable to perform our responsibilities and duties to the best of our abilities because we are restricted somehow. But we are serious about the project renewal of the ANC Youth League. We've realized that the absence of a youth voice in our society and in this country has led us to where we are today. And we can assure you that the ANC Youth League is on its renewal process. We are planning to take young people to a congress where an elected structure will be elected there, and will be able to take young people forward. Plans have been made, but obviously because of the COVID regulations, we're not moving in the fastest speed that we would prefer to. But the ANC Youth League is there, and we are prepared to renew it. On the issue of I think, Kathy, you were asking about young people who are not. Do you mind repeating the question? I think it's about young people who are unemployed. I can't remember, but who are not in
So of young people are unemployed and they don't have tertiary, and they have a challenge with that. What is the NYTT's plan to address that?
Yes. In fact, if you were to look at the demands that we made to the Treasury, where we were demanding for the creation of jobs and the scrapping of experiences in order for young people to be taken into the work environment, we were advocating for the fact that it's not only young people who are in tertiary who are unemployed or unemployable. In fact, if you look at the figures, 52% of of people that are unemployed. It's people without, matric. So we need to advocate for a skills revolution in this country. And it's one of the issues that we've been speaking so profoundly about, that we need a skills revolution in this country. And where do we get the skill? We need to tap into the TVET space where, artisanry work will be made available for young people. But we also need to speak to what Thobela is speaking about, the 30% procurement regime change that we demand in the various state organs, to say you do not have, even if there are young people who do not have a formal education, but we're able to integrate them into the mainstream economy. They're able to get tender opportunities in the various departments and state organs that are there. So we believe that we need to create a balancing act. It's a reality. And ideally would love to have every young person in school, but we're dealing with the reality that not all young people are going to be found in the doors of schools, whether it's universities, whether it's the TVETs, but we need to create that balancing act. Young people that cannot be absorbed in universities, let's find space. Let TVETs be funded. More funding must be made for TVETs. We need artisans in this country. Young people that cannot find space in the tertiary institutions of learning, let them have those cooperatives. Let's go into communities. Let's go into rural areas. Let's make sure that they're integrated in the agricultural space. Let's make sure that the procurement spend in departments caters for young people. They do not have to have a degree in order for them to get a job from a tender opportunity from government. So we're saying as the ANC Youth League, let's create that balancing act. But most importantly, we're saying that the fact that other young people could not afford an opportunity to enter a university door does not mean that they must be, thrown out of the window. Let's create that balancing act. Let's find ways to integrate them. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ms. Mohale. Let me come to you, Mr. Mashatile, and then I'll head on off to Mr. Maponya.
You want me to come back, Kathy?
On the question of accountability.
Accountability. Okay, I didn't say anything about that. There are various ways to ensure accountability. One way is by communities themselves. You see, for instance, the ANC introduced this idea of, from time to time, going with, let's say the mayor will go with all councillors to a community, and they'll have these public meetings or Izimbizo where communities come out and raise their issues and say, in your manifesto, you said you'll build a road, where is the road, etc., etc. But the political parties themselves, especially a governing party like the ANC, must have its own ways of holding its public representative accountable. So what we have done in the ANC, we've made sure that in the Secretary General's office, there is mechanism to ensure reporting by ministers who come and we say, okay, what have you done? We have agreed that we're going to implement this policy. How far are you, etc., etc. In the presidency, likewise, we did the same, where we have people there who would also demand a report about what people are doing in government. So that's the mechanism. But then in government itself, Keith, you know that in South Africa, we have very robust parliamentary system. You know, I used to be a minister myself in government, and I know that from time to time, the portfolio committee will call us, and I'll go there with my DGs and DDGs, and sometimes it won't be a very nice meeting where MPs will question you and say, we've approved this budget, this is what you said you're going to do, why is this not done, etc. When I was in Parliament myself as a chair of the Appropriation Committee, I would call ministers and DGs to account on their budgets. So those mechanisms are there, and we must just make them more robust. I wouldn't be sure whether, with the advent of the COVID-19, whether maybe those processes have been weakened up a bit, but I know that it can be done online. So ministers must be held accountable, DGs, DDGs. Nobody must be left to do as they wish. So the mechanisms are there, and let's make them work. Thank you, Kathy.
Sure, thank you so much. Mr. Maponya?
Hi, Kathy. Yes, just to respond on the issues of accountability and what we've seen that has come to be of great impact, why when we seek to advance youth employment and youth owned businesses to be procured from, there seems to be more fear more than anything else that we've seen based on the challenge that came in 2017 on the procurement preferential procurement regulations of 2017. Although the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act of 2000 was never actually that one repealed, and it allows for preference to still take place in the country, which is why even now we actually, when you look at the current National Youth Policy 2030, it actually advances the mechanisms to hold and the pillars to hold accounting officers accountable. We need now to be able to say we cannot have the same process that took place within the previous draft integrated youth development strategy, where it was never actually adopted. It went to Parliament, it sat there for 5 years, no one adopted it, and which is where the interventions and implementation of the policy sets in. And when we have a policy that does not have proper clear interventions or implementation mechanisms, it will continue not to work, which is what happened with the previous policy. And there was no accountability that was then held on top of those that were then sitting in government as accounting officers, DGs, DDGs, CEOs, or those that are financial officers in government. And for us, we believe if we can advance the current integrated youth development strategy that speaks to the policy itself, we'll be able then to say, of the percentages or set-asides that have already been set in there, 40% for women, 30% for youth, 7% for persons with disabilities. If we can get those to be then approved and clearly stipulated from National Treasury, we'll then get to see the traction, because everybody else now from top down, they'll have to then be able to report on their frameworks to say in their performance of what they need to do or report on their performances, they will then be as KPIs in those performances and be placed as KPIs. For as long as they are not placed as KPIs in their performances, youth development continues to be neglected in the country, and nobody reports efficiently and sufficiently towards youth development. So for us, let us advance and make sure that National Treasury is able to speak to the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act of 2000 and ensure that the policy speaks to that. The preferential procurement regulations of 2017 that were challenged and the state attorney spoke to those, we can put them aside. It is not a problem, but preference can still be made in order for us to advance youth development in the country. Because for us to have, for the next 10 years, because the current policy is a decade policy, it will go up until 2030. For us to not have youth development taking place where it is needed, and for youth to be put in mainstream economy, not only placed in incubation programs where it is just a tick box exercise for corporates as well. And here it is challenging business as well to say business must be able to take a rightful position in order to advance also youth development. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks for that, Mr. Maponya. Ms. Mogale, you wanted to come on?
Oh, yes. I actually wanted to add to what the Treasurer General had spoken about on the issues of accountability. And I think Thobela has touched on the issues I wanted to speak to, because I also feel that we need to speak on the centrality of youth development, because as you might have seen, we've got so many different departments that if you check into the various departments, there's a youth unit that is doing specific work or is expected to do specific work on youth development. And then you've got an entire department, which is the Department of, women and youth and people with disability, which is also doing its own thing. So we need to sort of, and then you've got the NYDA that is doing that. So we need to have, for me, a point of, a center where all these issues are discussed, are planned, and are implemented. And therefore, you are able to point at a person that must account. And we have said this as the ANC Youth League for some time, that perhaps it's time we had a youth ministry where the issues of young people are discussed. I know it's a very difficult matter when we raise it because, but it could help because I know there's so many youth units where we have got ghost workers. People are just placed there because people need a salary, but there's no actual work that is taking place. So we need to stop those things. We need to have a youth ministry where issues of youth development are centralized, focused, for a focal point of those issues, and accountability becomes easier in that manner. Thank you very much.
All right. Let me thank you all for your contributions in this round of the discussions. We've run completely out of time for this conversation. In fact, we are over time, and one certainly gets the sense that we've only begun to scrape the surface in terms of some of where the problems, the challenges, the hurdles in the system lie, and how best those can be addressed or tackled in order to provide meaningful solutions. I don't know if any of the panelists, if the quick closing remarks from any of the panelists, I'm going to ask you to be very brief before I hand on to Mr. Mbele, just to wrap us up for today.
Well, are you taking with my name or should we shoot? Oh.
From my side, Kathy, is just to say, I think it's clear that we need more engagements of this nature. So I'm sure SIPO will, together with their partner, Maiden Guardian, will try and give us enough space to engage on these matters. I said in my input earlier that we want the young people to the front. Young people must not wait to be invited. They need to go and knock on those doors and say, we are here. I think that's what we need to do. But let's have more engagement on these matters. Thank you very much.
Mr. Maponya?
Thank you, Program Director. Thank you, Kathy. And mine is to say, with the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability now given the rightful responsibility as the custodian of youth development, one, it needs to act and be able to have teeth so that it can be able to monitor responsive planning of youth development across all the government entities and across all departments, so that we are able to have and be able to see youth development taking place in a manner that it needs to take place. But yes, currently, please, the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, it is the custodian, it must act in that fashion.
Thank you so much for that. I'm not seeing any of the other speakers unmute. Okay, Gidiboni, there we go. Okay.
Can I come in?
Okay. Sure, go for it. Go for it, Mr. Ghali.
No, I wanted to say that this is the decade of the youth. There will be nothing about young people without young people actually participating in that. It is the decade of the youth. Young people have been subjugated for the longest of time. What's saying as young people of this country, enough is enough. And we're hoping that those that have come before us will come to the party and cooperate with our humble plea that nothing and no decisions must be made about young people without them forming part and parcel of the table that must negotiate the way forward. Thank you very much.
All right. Gidiboni?
Kathy, what I was going to say has been summed up very well, actually, because I was going to say from everything that I've been hearing, I hear lots of opportunity, and there's a lot of opportunity for young people to act and to create the world that we want to see. So it's important that the people who are listening, the young people who are listening, to stand up with us with the change we're trying to make from the business, academic, and every other aspect for young people. We need to unite and we need to act decisively as young people for us to see the change we want in this world. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Mr. Hooper?
Yes, thank you. Mine is to say that it's time that we re-look again into the separation of NYDA, to have a separate leg that deals with entrepreneurship, and we have the older leg that deals with other administration and support of the young people. If we cannot do that, the current one that we're having is overloaded with a lot of work to do. It end up giving less focus in terms of entrepreneurship development. And ours that we need is a transformation in economic transformation. We cannot ever transform the economy if we continue to close doors for all other young people that are happening to the economy. If we need to do that, we need to separate things, start to separate quotas. Wherever there is a certain development and opportunity, we say this one is reserved for young people. We are only seeking 30% into engagement whenever you go back, Mr. Mashati. We need 30% of every opportunity and every advancement that young people do have or that are happening into the economy. Firstly, to the state boards. Secondly, to all the boards into the private sectors and corporations. Thirdly, to all executive developments across the board. Thirdly, to any other advancement of BEE, either related shares or not. Fourthly, to any other interventions that it is needed for benefit of all the people in South Africa. Cut off for our request is 30%. It must be identical and quantified and qualified for that related part. In that way, we'll be able to measure our successes going forward. We thank you.
All right. Thanks for that. Mr. Mbele, this is probably going to be the shortest closing remark you'll ever have to give.
I will try, Katie. We're concluding this discussion. Let me take this opportunity to thank, and our appreciation goes to Comrade Paul Mashatile, our TG, the CEO of Maiden Garden, Mr. Hussein Kechika, and your team, Wendy, the team from PBF, Program Director, our panelists. We thank you for being part of this. If I may ask our speakers to provide us with the presentation and contact details in the event of further queries. And to all the youth, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for participation. Comrade TG, you have made a call and will implement it of setting up the progressive youth in business. And we hope today's event has inspired you to act in the interest of youth of South Africa. We're looking forward to seeing you at our next engagement. In that note, let me say thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Sipho.
All right. Thank you all for being part of the conversation today. And one certainly hopes that it will continue from here. Like I said, very much a sense that we've only begun to scrape the surface of where the challenges actually lie. And I can see that the reality is that we've got a lot of young people that are interested in providing solutions to the problems that our country is facing. And we cannot afford to sleep on that. We have to take up the solutions as they are provided. All right, let's wrap it up there for this afternoon. Have a lovely one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you.
The National Executive Committee declares the theme for 2021 to be unity, renewal, and reconstruction in the year of Charlotte Maxeke.
The past year has been challenging for all of us. The coronavirus and its impact has been felt the world over. But the strength of the South African people has always been measured by its resilience and fortitude, and the willingness to unite and stand together. The African National Congress proudly presents the Progressive Business Forum, the platform to herald a new dawn for the South African economy. Bringing accountability, transparency, and opportunity to the business community, and striving to give effect to the call for a social compact with business, the Progressive Business Forum harnesses the power of technology, making it easier than ever before to unlock your business's potential. As a truly inclusive portal for all, your inputs are now able to reach the highest level of attention of our ANC leadership and government leaders, connecting you to an economic hub bursting with possibilities. It's a new modern look, underpinned by a traditional set of values that puts you, our subscribers, first. So, how can you be a part of it? Simple. Sign in, enter your business's details, and choose the package that best represents your company's goals. Our platform is safe, easy to use, POPIA compliant, and joining gains you access to a galaxy of benefits. From exclusive ministerial networking events to world-class webinars, workshops, skills training, trade facilitation, women in business, and so much more, the Progressive Business Forum platform becomes your gateway to a future never dreamed possible. Together, let's resolve the challenges facing our country and build a prosperous future. South Africa is ready to grow. Are you?